The harsh fluorescent lights of Chicago Memorial Hospital flickered. Outside, freezing rain pounded against the thick glass windows, turning the streets into sheets of black ice. Jessica dragged her feet across the cheap linoleum floor. Her back ached. Her cheap sneakers, the ones she bought on sale 3 years ago, squeaked with every step. 12 hours down, 2 to go. She rubbed her tired eyes, trying to ignore the bitter taste of stale coffee in her mouth. She just wanted to go home. Home to the man who made the rest of her shitty life bearable. "Jessica, bed 4 needs a new IV," Sarah, the charge nurse, yelled from down the hall. "Yeah, I'm on it," Jessica mumbled. She grabbed the plastic bag of fluids from the cart. Her fingers trembled a little. She hadn't eaten since noon. Money was still tight. Even though she didn't have to live like this anymore, old habits died hard. She refused to use Joon-seo's dirty money for her own basic needs. She was stubborn like that. She walked into room 4. The old man inside was snoring loudly. She reached for the needle. Then, the front doors of the emergency room blew wide open. Not pushed, blown. The glass shattered into a million tiny pieces, flying across the waiting room like angry hornets. The sound of screaming followed instantly. Jessica dropped the IV bag. It hit the floor with a wet slap. "What the fuck?" she whispered. She peeked out of the room. 3 men wearing black ski masks stomped into the triage area. They held heavy black guns, assault rifles. The metal gleamed under the awful hospital lights. The rain blew in behind them, chilling the warm air. "Where is she?" the biggest man roared. His voice was thick, rough like sandpaper. "Where the fuck is the nurse? Jessica." Her heart stopped. Her blood turned to ice. They knew her name. This wasn't a robbery for painkillers. This was a hit. The ghosts of her husband's life had finally tracked her down to her shitty little safe haven. "I don't know," Sarah screamed, backing away with her hands up. The man didn't hesitate. He swung the butt of his rifle, smashing it into Sarah's face. Sarah went down hard, blood spraying across the front desk. "No," Jessica screamed before she could stop herself. The 3 men snapped their heads toward her. Dead eyes stared back through the holes in their masks. "There's the bitch," the big man grunted. He raised the gun. Jessica tried to run. She turned, her cheap sneakers slipping on the spilled IV fluid. She hit the ground hard, her knee cracking against the tile. She scrambled, clawing at the door frame. Bang! The sound deafened her. A burning, ripping fire tore through her shoulder. It threw her forward. She hit the ground, her face smacking the dirty linoleum. Blood, hot and fast, poured down her arm. The world spun. Her vision blurred into dark, fuzzy shapes. "Joon-seo," she choked out, tasting copper in her mouth. The heavy boots stepped closer. The cold metal barrel pressed against the back of her head. Before we see what happens next, please leave a like if you're enjoying the video. It really helps the algorithm push more dark romance stories like this to you. Also, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? Or rate this video from 1 to 10. Now, listen to me closely. If you don't hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM right now, you might leave Jessica to bleed out and die alone on this filthy hospital floor with a gun to her head. Don't be the reason she loses her life just when she finally found a man who loves her. Subscribe to save her. The boot stopped. A siren wailed in the distance. The man with the gun cursed under his breath. "Cops, we got loud too fast. Let's move. She's bleeding out anyway." "You sure?" another voice asked. "Look at her, that's an artery. She's done. Let's get the fuck out of here." The heavy boots ran away, splashing through the puddles of rainwater and blood. The freezing wind blew through the shattered doors, chilling Jessica to the bone. She couldn't feel her fingers. She couldn't feel her legs. She just felt the burning hole in her shoulder and the cold floor against her cheek. The darkness pulled at her, heavy and sweet. She let her eyes close. 10 miles away, in a glass penthouse overlooking the dark, stormy skyline of Chicago, Joon-seo sat in a leather chair. He held a crystal glass of whiskey. The liquid burned his throat, but he didn't care. He liked the burn. He liked the control. Across the long oak desk sat 2 men. They were sweating. They smelled like fear and cheap cologne. "Mr. Yu," the taller man stammered, his hands shaking as he held a manila folder. "We didn't mean to cross into your territory on the south side. The shipment it got misdirected." Joon-seo stared at him. His eyes were dark, flat, and completely empty. He didn't blink. He just set his glass down. The soft clink echoed in the massive, quiet room. Misdirected, Joon-seo repeated. His voice was smooth, deep, and carried no emotion. It was the voice of a man who killed without losing sleep. Yes, sir, it was a mistake. A $3 million mistake, Joon-seo said softly. He leaned forward. He wore a crisp black shirt, the sleeves rolled up to show the dark, twisting tattoos on his forearms. Do I look like a man who accepts mistakes? The men swallowed hard. No, sir, please, we can get the money, just give us a week. Joon-seo reached into the drawer of his desk. He pulled out a silver handgun. He placed it on the desk between them. You have 24 hours, or I will send my men to your homes. I know where your wives sleep. I know where your kids go to school. Do you understand? Yes, sir, thank you, sir. They stood up, practically tripping over their own feet to get out of the room. Joon-seo watched them leave, fools. He hated this city sometimes. It was full of rats trying to eat the crumbs he left behind. The only pure thing in this rotten place was her, Jessica. His chest tightened just thinking about her. She was working the night shift again. He hated it. He had millions in the bank. He owned half the politicians in the city. Yet his stubborn, beautiful wife insisted on wiping old men's asses and eating cold sandwiches in a break room. She said it kept her grounded. She said she wouldn't let his dark world swallow her light. His phone buzzed on the desk. It was a private number, one of his shadows. He always kept 2 armed guards watching the hospital from the outside. He picked it up. Speak. Boss, the voice on the other end was breathless, panicked. Nobody panicked when they talked to him. It meant death. Boss, it's the hospital, Memorial. Joon-seo stood up slowly. What happened? An attack, 3 shooters. They went straight into the ER. Boss, they hit her. The world stopped spinning. The rain hitting the glass behind him vanished. The low hum of the city died. There was only a sudden, deafening silence in his ears. Is she breathing? He asked. The monster inside him, the dark, violent beast he kept chained up for her, just broke the lock. Paramedics are on her now. She lost a lot of blood. It was a hit, boss. They were asking for her. Lock down the hospital, Joon-seo roared. His voice shattered the calm of the penthouse. Nobody goes in. Nobody comes out. If the cops try to stop you, put a bullet in their heads. I am 5 minutes away. He dropped the phone. He didn't grab his coat. He grabbed the gun from the desk, shoved it into the waistband of his pants, and sprinted for the private elevator. His mind went blank. No, not blank. It filled with blood. It filled with a pure, white-hot rage that threatened to burn him alive. Jessica, his sweet, tired, stubborn Jessica. She had lived a life of pain. She grew up with nothing, betrayed by her family, crushed by debt. He had promised to protect her. He had sworn on his life that his violent world would never touch her. He broke that promise. The elevator doors opened to the underground garage. His driver, Jin, was already standing by the black SUV, holding the door open. He had heard the shout over the radio. Drive, Joon-seo said, getting into the back seat. Hit anything that gets in your way. The heavy truck peeled out, the tires screeching against the concrete. They burst onto the rainy streets. The wipers slapped frantically against the windshield. Jin ran every red light. Cars honked, swerved, and crashed behind them, but Joon-seo didn't look back. He loaded a fresh clip into his gun. His hands, which had been perfectly steady while threatening 2 men 5 minutes ago, were shaking. Faster, he growled. I'm flooring it, boss, Jin said, his eyes wide in the rearview mirror. When they pulled up to Chicago Memorial, it was a war zone. Police cars had surrounded the entrance, their blue and red lights flashing against the wet pavement. Yellow tape flapped in the freezing wind. Paramedics were rushing people out on stretchers. Joon-seo didn't wait for the car to stop. He pushed the door open and stepped out into the pouring rain. His black shirt soaked through instantly, sticking to his skin. 2 police officers stepped in front of him, holding up their hands. Sir, you can't be here. This is an active crime scene. Joon-seo didn't slow down. He didn't even blink. He grabbed the nearest officer by the throat and slammed him backward into the side of a police cruiser. The man gagged, his eyes bugging out. Hey, let him go, the other cop yelled, reaching for his weapon. Instantly, 4 laser sights appeared on the second cop's chest. Joon-seo's men stepped out of the shadows, their rifles raised, fingers on the triggers. The cop froze, swallowing hard, lifting his hands away from his belt. Joon-seo leaned in close to the choking officer's face. "My wife is in there," he whispered, his voice shaking with a terrifying, deadly calm. "If you try to stop me again, I will kill you and every single person wearing a badge on this street. Do we have an understanding?" The officer nodded frantically, gasping for air. Joon-seo dropped him and pushed through the double doors. The emergency room was a mess, glass crunched under his expensive shoes. Blood smeared the floor, a lot of blood. His stomach dropped. It looked like a slaughterhouse. He saw Sarah, the charge nurse, holding an ice pack to her bruised face. She was crying. He walked up to her. He didn't care that he looked like a nightmare. "Where is she?" he demanded. Sarah flinched, looking up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Joon-seo, they took her up to surgery. Operating room 3, she lost so much blood. They shot her in the shoulder, but it hit an artery. Her heart stopped in the hallway. They had to use the paddles." His chest felt like someone had hit it with a sledgehammer. Her heart stopped. She died. For a moment, his wife was dead. "Who did it?" he asked softly. The anger was so deep now it felt like a cold, bottomless ocean. "I don't know," Sarah sobbed. "3 guys, they wore masks, but they asked for her by name, they knew who she was." Joon-seo turned away. He walked toward the elevators. His men fell in step behind him, forming a wall of dark suits and lethal weapons. The hospital staff pressed themselves against the walls, too terrified to speak. They knew who he was now. The secret was out. The nice, quiet man who occasionally dropped off coffee for Jessica was a monster. He stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the surgical floor. He stared at his reflection in the metal doors. His face was wet with rain. His eyes were completely black. Someone had touched his wife. Someone had made her bleed. He wasn't just going to kill them. He was going to find everyone they loved, everyone they knew, and he was going to burn their entire world to ash. He was going to peel their skin off piece by piece while they begged for mercy. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. He stepped out into the quiet, sterile hallway of the surgical wing. The red light above operating room 3 was glowing brightly. In use. He walked over to the hard plastic chairs lined up against the wall. He sat down. He pulled the gun from his waistband, rested his arms on his knees, and let the gun hang loose in his hands. "Jin," he said quietly. His driver stepped forward. "Yes, boss." "Find them. Check the cameras on the street. Call in every favor we have. Wake up the dirty cops on our payroll. Find out who ordered the hit. And when we find them, boss." Joon-seo looked up. A cold, wicked smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Don't kill them. Bring them to the warehouse by the docks. I want to look them in the eyes when I ruin their lives." He looked back down at the floor. The waiting began. Every minute that ticked by felt like broken glass tearing through his chest. He prayed to a god he didn't believe in. He begged, "Don't take her. Please, don't take her from me." The red light above the heavy doors stayed on for 3 hours. 3 hours of pure, agonizing hell. Joon-seo sat perfectly still on the hard plastic chair. He didn't blink. He didn't check his phone. He just stared at his hands. They were covered in her blood. It had dried into a dark, flaky crust against his pale skin. Jin had offered him a wet towel an hour ago. Joon-seo had nearly broken Jin's jaw for interrupting his thoughts. He wanted the blood to stay. He needed it to stay. It was a physical reminder of his failure. Every time the second hand ticked on the cheap wall clock, Joon-seo saw the attack in his mind. He pictured the heavy doors of the emergency room blowing open. He pictured the fear in Jessica's soft brown eyes. She hated guns. She hated violence. That was the whole damn reason she refused to live in his penthouse. She wanted a normal life. She wanted to heal people, not hurt them. And his world had reached out and put a bullet in her anyway. The red light clicked off. Joon-seo stood up. His knees popped, but he didn't feel the stiffness. His men instantly stood up straighter behind him, their hands resting on their weapons. The heavy metal doors pushed open. A doctor walked out. He wore blue scrubs. They were stained with dark, wet spots. The doctor pulled down his paper mask, taking a deep, shaky breath. He looked exhausted. He looked like he had just fought a war. Joon-seo walked right up to him. He didn't give the man space to breathe. "Is she alive?" Joon-seo asked. His voice was completely flat. The doctor swallowed hard, looking at the large men in black suits standing behind Joon-seo. He knew who he was dealing with. Yes, Mr. Yu, she's alive. Joon-seo closed his eyes. For the first time in 10 years, he felt a massive weight lift off his chest. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. But it was close, the doctor continued, his voice shaking a little. The bullet entered her left shoulder and tore through the subclavian artery. She lost a massive amount of blood before we even got her on the table. Her heart stopped for almost 2 minutes in the hallway. We had to crack her chest to clamp the artery and restart her heart. Can I see her? Joon-seo demanded. He didn't care about the medical details. He just needed to see her chest moving up and down. He needed to know she wasn't a ghost. We are moving her to the private VIP suite on the top floor, just like you asked, the doctor said, backing up a step. She is heavily sedated. She won't wake up for a few hours. The pain is going to be immense when she does. And Mr. Yu, she's very weak. Any stress right now could cause her heart to fail again. She needs absolute peace. She will have it, Joon-seo said. He walked past the doctor without another word. The top floor of Chicago Memorial Hospital was usually reserved for the mayor or rich athletes. Tonight, it belonged entirely to the mafia. Joon-seo's men stood at every elevator door and every stairwell. Nobody came up without a badge, and even then, they were searched twice. Joon-seo opened the heavy wooden door to room 801. The room was huge, with soft yellow lights and a large window looking out over the rainy city. But Joon-seo only looked at the bed in the center. Jessica looked so small. Her dark, beautiful skin looked gray against the white hospital sheets. A thick, clear tube ran down her throat, pumping air into her lungs. Wires stuck to her chest, connecting to a loud machine that beeped a steady, slow rhythm. Her left shoulder was wrapped in thick white bandages. Joon-seo walked to the side of the bed. His legs felt heavy. He pulled up a chair and sat down. He reached out with his bloody hands and gently took her right hand. Her fingers were freezing. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. I'm sorry, he whispered into the quiet room. I am so fucking sorry, Jess. A single tear slipped out of his dark eyes and fell onto her hospital gown. He didn't wipe it away. He just stared at her face, watching her chest rise and fall with the machine. She looked so fragile. This woman had grown up in the worst projects in the city. She had survived a crackhead mother. She had survived abusive foster homes. She had worked 3 jobs just to pay for nursing school. She was the strongest person he had ever met. And he had almost gotten her killed because he couldn't keep his dogs on a leash. The door opened with a soft click. Jin stepped into the room. He walked quietly, keeping his head bowed. Joon-seo didn't look back. Speak. We found them, boss, Jin said. His voice was a low whisper. The 3 shooters. They were trying to get out of the city on the I-90. We ran their car off the road. Are they alive? Yes, boss. A few broken bones from the crash, but they are breathing. We took them to the warehouse by the docks. They are tied to the chairs. Joon-seo gently placed Jessica's hand back on the bed. He pulled the blanket up to keep her warm. He stood up and turned to face his driver. The sadness in his eyes was completely gone. The monster was back. Who sent them? Joon-seo asked. Marcus Thorne, Jin replied. The boss of the West Side crew. They said Marcus was pissed about you taking over the shipment routes last month. He wanted to send a message. He wanted to hurt you the only way he knew how. Joon-seo slowly unbuttoned his cuffs. He rolled his sleeves up over his dark tattoos. Marcus Thorne, a dead man. What are your orders, boss? Keep the shooters in the warehouse, Joon-seo said, his voice cold and hard like steel. Get the pliers, get the blowtorch, get the salt. I want them awake when I get there. And Jin. Yes, boss. Send a team to Marcus Thorne's house. Don't kill him, kill his guards, take his wife and his kids, lock them in a shipping container. I want him to know what it feels like to lose his family before I cut his fucking head off. Jin nodded sharply. It will be done. Jin left the room. Joon-seo turned back to the bed. He needed to go. He needed to make them bleed. He needed to hear them scream until their throats tore open. It was the only way to make the burning rage in his chest go away. But as he took a step toward the door, a small, weak sound stopped him. The machine next to the bed started beeping faster. The rhythm changed from a slow tick to a rapid, panicked pulse. Joon-seo spun around. Jessica's head was moving side to side on the pillow. Her face twisted in pain. Her eyes fluttered, fighting against the heavy drugs. Jess, Joon-seo rushed to the bed. He leaned over her, grabbing her hand again. "I'm here, baby, I'm here, don't move." She choked on the breathing tube. Her hands came up weakly, trying to grab her throat. She was panicking. "Doctor," Joon-seo roared toward the door. "Get in here right now." 2 nurses and a doctor ran into the room. They pushed past Joon-seo. "She's waking up, the tube is choking her," the doctor said quickly. "Hold her shoulders down gently, I'm pulling it out." Joon-seo grabbed her right shoulder, keeping her steady. The doctor pulled the long plastic tube out of her throat. Jessica gagged, coughing violently. Every cough made her body jerk, and every jerk made her scream in pain. Tears poured down her face. "Hurts," she cried, her voice rough and broken like gravel. "It hurts." "I know, baby, I know," Joon-seo said, brushing the sweaty hair out of her face. "You're safe, I've got you." The doctor checked the monitors. "Her vitals are stabilizing. The pain medicine is wearing off. I'll push another dose through her IV." "No," Jessica gasped. She reached out and grabbed the doctor's wrist. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were suddenly clear. "No more drugs, makes my head foggy. Just ice." The doctor looked at Joon-seo. Joon-seo nodded. The doctor and nurses quickly left the room, leaving them alone in the quiet suite. Jessica took a slow, rattling breath. She looked around the fancy room, then looked up at Joon-seo. She saw the dark, dried blood on his hands. She saw the blood on his white shirt. "You look like shit," she whispered, forcing a tiny, weak smile. Joon-seo let out a wet laugh. He pressed his forehead against hers. "You got shot in the chest, and you're making fun of my shirt. You are impossible." "I'm tired," she said. Her eyes locked onto his. She stared deep into his black eyes. She knew him better than anyone in the world. She saw the darkness swirling in there. She saw the violent storm waiting to break out. "I know," he said softly. "Go back to sleep. I'll be right here when you wake up." "No, you won't," she said. Her voice was weak, but it was hard. She didn't let go of his hand. "You're going to leave." Joon-seo stiffened. He pulled his head back to look at her. "I have business to take care of. It won't take long." "Business?" Jessica repeated. She closed her eyes as another wave of pain washed over her shoulder. She gritted her teeth until it passed. "You mean murder. You mean torture." "They tried to kill you, Jessica." His voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl. He wasn't mad at her. He was mad at the world. "They blew a hole in your chest. Your heart stopped. You died tonight. Do you understand that? You left me." "But I came back," she argued, squeezing his hand. "I'm right here. I'm alive." "And they need to pay for making you bleed," he shouted, stepping back from the bed. He paced across the room like a caged tiger. "Marcus Thorne ordered this. His men pulled the trigger. I am going to rip them apart piece by piece. I'm going to burn his entire fucking world to the ground." "No," Jessica said. The word was sharp in the quiet room. Joon-seo stopped pacing. He stared at her, his chest heaving. "What did you say?" "I said no." Jessica pushed herself up against the pillows. White-hot agony flared in her shoulder, making black spots dance in her vision, but she ignored it. She needed to look him in the eye. "You promised me, Joon-seo. The night we got married, you promised me. No more starting wars. No more innocent people getting caught in the crossfire." "There is nothing innocent about this," he yelled. "They came for my wife." "And what happens after you kill Thorne?" she yelled back, her voice cracking. "His brother comes for you, then his cousins, then you kill them. Then another gang steps up. It never ends, Joon-seo. It's just blood and more blood until one of us is dead for good. I am protecting you." "You are feeding the monster," she cried. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't fall in love with the monster. I fell in love with the man who brought me soup when I was sick. I fell in love with the man who built a shelter for stray dogs on the south side. If you walk out that door tonight and butcher those men, if you lock Thorne's children in a box like your driver said." Joon-seo froze. He didn't know she was awake when Jin was in the room. "Yeah, I heard that," Jessica sobbed, holding her good hand over her chest. "If you hurt his kids, you are no better than the men who shot me." Joon-seo walked back to the bed. He grabbed the rails, leaning over her. His eyes were wild, desperate. "I have to do this, Jess. I have to make an example of them. If I don't, the whole city will think I'm weak. They will all come for you. I can't protect you if they don't fear me." I don't care about the city, she whispered. She reached up and touched his cheek. Her thumb brushed over his jawline. I care about your soul. I don't want to be the reason you turn into a devil. Please, Joon-seo, let the cops handle Thorn. Let it go. I can't, he choked out. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. Jessica pulled her hand back. The warmth left her eyes. She looked at him with a cold, heartbreaking sadness. Then go, she said quietly. She turned her head away, looking out the dark window at the rain. But if you walk out that door to kill them, don't come back to this room, because the man I love won't be the one walking back in. Joon-seo stood frozen. The silence in the room was louder than a bomb. He looked at the door. He thought about the warehouse. He thought about the blowtorch and the revenge that he craved so badly it made his teeth ache. Then he looked back at the woman in the bed, his wife, his only light in a dark, ugly world. He had a choice to make, and either way, he was going to lose something he couldn't live without. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind him, sealing the quiet hospital room away. Joon-seo stood in the sterile white hallway. The bright fluorescent lights hummed above his head. He looked down at his hands. The dried blood cracked off his skin and fell to the spotless floor like dirty brown snow. His chest heaved up and down. His breathing was loud and ragged. The beast inside him, the dark thing that kept him alive on the streets for 15 years, was screaming. It clawed at his ribs. It wanted to get out. It wanted to go to the warehouse. It wanted to hear men beg for their lives. Boss, Jin said. Joon-seo snapped his head up. Jin was standing a few feet away, holding a black wool coat. 4 of his best men stood behind him, holding long black bags that hid their rifles. They looked eager. They looked ready for a slaughter. The car is downstairs, running, Jin said, his voice low and serious. The blowtorch is hot. The men at the warehouse are waiting for you. We also have Thorn's address. We can grab his family in 20 minutes. Joon-seo stared at his driver. He opened his mouth, but the words got stuck in his throat. He looked back at the closed door of room 801. If he walked to that elevator, he would lose her. He knew Jessica. She didn't make empty threats. She would pack her cheap bags with her one good arm and disappear. She would rather live on the streets than sleep next to a monster. He slowly closed his bloody hands into tight fists. The bones in his knuckles popped. Call it off, Joon-seo said. His voice was a harsh whisper. Jin blinked. He stepped closer, sure he had heard wrong. Boss, call what off, the team for Thorn's house. All of it, Joon-seo said. He squeezed his fist so hard his nails dug into his palms. Call off the hit on Thorn's family, and the men in the warehouse, put a bullet in the back of their heads. Quick and clean, dump the bodies in the river. The hallway went completely silent. Even the big men in the back looked confused. They exchanged nervous looks. In their world, you didn't just shoot men who tried to kill your wife. You made a bloody, screaming example out of them. You chopped them up and mailed the pieces to their boss. Boss, Jin said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. If we do this quick, if we don't make them suffer, Marcus Thorn will think you are getting soft. The other bosses in the city will hear about it. They will think you don't have the stomach for war anymore. It will invite more attacks. Joon-seo closed the distance between them in half a second. He grabbed Jin by the throat and slammed him against the hospital wall. A framed picture of a smiling doctor crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces. The 4 guards tensed, their hands twitching toward their hidden guns, but they didn't dare move against him. I know how the fucking streets work, Jin, Joon-seo snarled. His black eyes burned with a terrifying, wild fire. He leaned his face inches from his driver. I know exactly what Thorn will think, but my wife is in that room. She nearly died tonight because of the blood on my hands. If I go torture those men, she leaves me. And if she leaves me, I will burn this entire city to the ground just for fun. Do you understand me? Jin gagged, nodding his head as best as he could. Yes, yes, boss. Joon-seo let him go. Jin coughed, rubbing his neck. Shoot the men in the warehouse, Joon-seo repeated, his voice dropping back to that dead, flat tone. Do not touch Thorn's wife or his kids. We will deal with Thorn later. Get out of my sight. Jin bowed quickly and hurried down the hall, waving for the guards to follow him. They disappeared into the elevator. Joon-seo stood alone in the hallway for a long time. He felt sick. He felt like he was betraying his own nature. He walked over to the small visitor's bathroom near the nurse's station. He pushed the door open and walked to the sink. He turned on the hot water. He grabbed a cheap bar of harsh pink soap and started scrubbing his hands. He scrubbed until his skin was raw and bright red. He watched the water turn pink, then brown, then clear as Jessica's blood washed down the drain. He splashed cold water on his face. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like a killer trying to wear a human mask. He didn't know if he could do this. He didn't know if he could be a good man, but he knew he had to try. He dried his hands with a rough paper towel and walked back out. He opened the door to room 801 very slowly. The room was dark. The storm outside was still raging, slapping rain against the thick glass. The only light came from the machines beeping next to the bed. Jessica was lying on her side, facing the window. Her shoulders were shaking. She was crying, trying to keep quiet so it wouldn't hurt her chest. She thought he had left. She thought she was alone. Joon-seo walked across the room. His expensive shoes made no sound on the floor. He pulled the plastic chair right up to the edge of the bed and sat down. He didn't say anything. He just reached out and gently placed his large, clean hand on her waist. Jessica gasped. She winced in pain as she rolled her head back to look over her good shoulder. Her eyes were red and puffy. Tears tracked through the sweat on her face. She saw him sitting there in the dark, his white shirt ruined, his face exhausted. "You stayed," she whispered. Her voice broke on the words. "I stayed," he said softly. She rolled onto her back, fighting through the sharp agony in her left side. She reached out with her right hand. Joon-seo leaned forward and caught it. He brought her small, warm hand to his face, pressing her palm against his cheek. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a starving man finding bread. Did you tell them to stop?" she asked. She needed to know. She needed to know he didn't just stay here while his dogs did the dirty work. "I told them to make it quick," he said honestly. He wouldn't lie to her, never her. "A bullet to the head, no torture. I called off the hit on Thorne's family. The kids are safe." Jessica let out a long, shaky breath. A fresh wave of tears spilled from her eyes, but this time they weren't sad. She pulled his head down closer. "Thank you. God, Joon-seo, thank you." "Don't thank me," he muttered, his voice thick with self-hatred. He kept his face buried in her hand. "You don't know how hard it was, Jess. You don't know how bad I want to go to that warehouse and peel their skin off. It is taking every ounce of control I have just to sit in this chair." "I know," she whispered. She stroked his dark hair with her fingers. "I know who you are, I know the darkness in you, but you chose the light tonight, you chose me." "I will always choose you," he said, lifting his head to look into her eyes. "Even if it kills me, even if it costs me everything I built, you are my only home." She smiled a small, tired smile. "Then come home, stop pacing around like a guard dog, lie with me." Joon-seo hesitated. He looked at all the tubes and wires connected to her. "I'll hurt you. The bed is too small." "I don't care," she said stubbornly. "I'm freezing, and I need to feel your heartbeat, please." He couldn't say no to her. He carefully took off his ruined suit jacket and dropped it on the floor. He unbuttoned his holster and set his heavy silver gun on the bedside table, right next to the plastic water pitcher. Then, moving slower than he ever had in his life, he climbed onto the narrow hospital bed. He lay on his side, keeping his weight completely off her. He gently pulled her against his chest, making sure not to bump her bandaged shoulder. She rested her head in the crook of his neck. She let out a soft sigh, her tense muscles finally relaxing against his solid body. The beep of the heart monitor slowed down to a steady, calm rhythm. Joon-seo wrapped his arm around her, holding her tight. He stared at the dark ceiling. She fell asleep in minutes, exhausted by the pain and the drugs, but Joon-seo didn't close his eyes. He stayed awake listening to the rain, listening to her breathe, and waiting for the sun to come up. He knew the choice he made tonight was going to have a massive price. The streets were unforgiving. Weakness was blood in the water, and the sharks were already circling. The gray light of morning finally pushed through the rain clouds. It lit up the hospital room in a cold, pale glow. Jessica was still sleeping soundly against his chest. Joon-seo's phone buzzed on the bedside table next to his gun. He moved carefully, slipping his arm out from under Jessica without waking her. He grabbed the phone and answered it, keeping his voice to a bare whisper. "Speak." "Boss," Jin said. The driver sounded out of breath. He sounded stressed. "It's bad." Joon-seo sat up on the edge of the bed. He rubbed his tired face. Tell me. We dumped the bodies in the river like you asked. But Thorn, he didn't run and hide. He didn't wait to see what you would do. When his men didn't check in, he made a move. Joon-seo's jaw tightened. What kind of move? He firebombed the South Side warehouse, boss, the one holding the imported cars. The whole place is gone, and 2 of our night guards were inside. They're dead. The air in Joon-seo's lungs turned to ice. 2 of his men who trusted him to lead them, men who had families, dead because he didn't strike first, because he sat in a hospital bed trying to be a good husband instead of a ruthless king. Thorn is putting the word out on the street right now, Jin continued, his voice tight. He's telling everyone that you've lost your nerve. He's saying the great Joon-seo is hiding in a hospital while his empire burns. 2 smaller gangs just stopped answering our calls. They think you're finished, boss. They think Thorn is the new king. Joon-seo looked over his shoulder. Jessica shifted in her sleep, a small frown on her face as her wounded shoulder twitched. She looked so peaceful. She looked innocent. He turned back around, staring at the gray city through the window. He had tried. He had really tried to do it her way. But the devil didn't care about second chances. Jin, Joon-seo whispered, and the cold, dead emptiness was back in his voice. Yes, boss. Gather the men, empty the armory, put every soldier we have on the streets. And Thorn, Jin asked. Joon-seo picked up his silver gun from the table. He checked the clip. Full. Find out where he sleeps. The truce is over. Joon-seo hung up the phone. He looked at the silver gun in his hand. The metal was cold. It felt right. It felt like home. He hated that it felt like home. He turned his head and looked at Jessica. She was still sleeping. Her chest moved up and down in a slow, steady rhythm. The heavy painkillers were keeping her under. That was good. She didn't need to see him leave. She didn't need to see the devil walk out the door. He grabbed his ruined suit jacket from the floor. He didn't put it on. It was covered in her dried blood. He just carried it in his left hand. He walked back to the bed and leaned over her. He brushed a soft curl of dark hair away from her face. He kissed her warm forehead. I tried, Jess, he whispered into the quiet room. I really fucking tried. He turned around and walked out of room 801. He closed the heavy wooden door behind him until it clicked shut. Jin was standing right there in the hallway. 4 huge men in black suits were standing behind him. They looked angry. They looked hungry for violence. They wanted blood for the 2 men who just died in the fire. Jin, Joon-seo said. His voice was completely empty. It didn't sound human. Put 10 men on this floor. Put 5 men in the lobby. Put 2 snipers on the roof across the street. Nobody comes into this room. I don't care if it's the damn mayor or the chief of police. If anyone tries to push past you, shoot them in the face. Yes, boss, Jin said, nodding his head. We will keep her safe. If she wakes up, Joon-seo paused. His chest hurt. It felt tight. If she wakes up, tell her I had to go fix a problem. Don't tell her about the fire at the warehouse. Don't tell her about Tommy and Rick dying. Just tell her I will be back when it is done. Understood. Joon-seo walked to the elevator. He hit the down button. He didn't look back. The silver doors opened and he stepped inside. The ride down to the underground parking garage felt like it took 1,000,000 years. When the doors finally opened again, the heavy smell of car exhaust and wet concrete hit his face. His black SUV was waiting with the engine running. 2 more black cars, fully loaded with his shooters, were parked right behind it. He got into the back seat. Another driver, a young kid named Choi, was behind the wheel. Choi's hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Where to, boss? Choi asked. He sounded nervous. The South Armory, Joon-seo said, staring out the dark window. And drive fast. The rain had slowed down to a nasty, freezing drizzle. The gray morning light made the city look dirty and mean. Joon-seo watched the wet streets blur past the window. He didn't feel sad anymore. He didn't feel conflicted about what Jessica wanted. Thorn crossed a line. You don't burn a man's business and kill his people when he offers a truce. You just don't do it. Now Marcus Thorn had to die. The South Armory was hidden under an old, abandoned bowling alley on the edge of the city. From the outside, it looked like a pile of trash covered in graffiti. Inside, it was a fortress. The SUV pulled down a long, dark ramp and stopped in a huge concrete room. The air smelled thick like gun oil, sweat, and cheap cigars. 50 men were standing around inside. They were loading rifles. They were sliding sharp knives into their boots. They were strapping black bulletproof vests over their chests. When Joon-seo stepped out of the car, the whole room went dead silent. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at him. They saw his white shirt stained with dark brown blood. They saw his dead, black eyes. They knew the king was back. Joon-seo walked to the center of the room. He looked at his men. These were killers, thieves, bad men, but they were his men. They ate from his hand, and they died for his name. "Marcus Thorne thinks I am weak," Joon-seo said. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. His voice carried across the quiet room like a cold knife. "He thinks because my wife got shot, I forgot how to run this city. He burned our warehouse. He burned our cars. He killed Tommy and Rick." A low, angry murmur went through the crowd. Men gripped their guns tighter. A few of them cursed under their breath. "Thorne broke the rules," Joon-seo continued, his eyes locking onto the faces in the crowd. "He went after my family. He went after yours. Today, we don't hold back. We don't negotiate. We are going to find every piece of dirt Thorne owns, and we are going to burn it to the ground. We are going to kill his lieutenants. We are going to kill his runners. And when he has nobody left to protect him, I am going to put a bullet in his head myself." The men cheered. It wasn't a happy sound. It was an ugly, violent sound. It was the sound of a pack of wild dogs getting ready to eat meat. Joon-seo walked over to a long metal folding table. It was covered in heavy weapons. He dropped his silver pistol on the table. It was too small for what came next. He picked up a heavy, black assault rifle. He checked the magazine. It was full of brass bullets. He grabbed 3 extra magazines and shoved them into his deep pockets. He pulled a thick black jacket over his bloody shirt and zipped it up. A heavy metal door on the side of the room slammed open. A big, bald man named Leo walked in. He was holding a smaller man by the back of the neck. The smaller man was bleeding from his nose. He looked completely terrified. His name was Mickey. Mickey ran illegal gambling numbers for Thorne on the west side, but he secretly sold information to Joon-seo for dirty drug money. Leo threw Mickey onto the hard concrete floor. Mickey landed with a loud smack, scraping his hands and groaning. "Found the rat hiding in a cheap motel room," Leo grunted, wiping a spot of blood off his own knuckles. He was trying to pack a bag and run out of town. Joon-seo walked over to Mickey. His heavy boots clicked on the floor. He looked down at the shaking man. He didn't feel a single drop of pity. "Please, Mr. Yu," Mickey cried, rolling onto his knees and holding his hands up like he was praying. "I didn't know about the hit. I swear to God. I didn't know he was going to shoot your wife or burn the warehouse. I'm just a numbers guy. I just do the math." Joon-seo crouched down so he was right in Mickey's face. He could smell the fear and the cheap alcohol on the man's breath. "Where is he, Mickey? Where is Thorne hiding his fat ass?" "He'll kill me," Mickey sobbed, snot running down his lip. "If I tell you, he'll peel my skin off. He told everyone if they talk, he'll kill their kids." Joon-seo pulled a long, sharp hunting knife from his belt. The metal shined in the terrible overhead lights. He reached out and grabbed Mickey by the jaw, forcing his head up. He pressed the cold steel of the blade right against Mickey's eye. "If you don't tell me right now, I will cut your eyes out," Joon-seo whispered. "And then I will let my men take turns breaking every bone in your body. You have 3 seconds. 1. "Okay, okay, oh shit, okay," Mickey screamed, tears mixing with the blood on his face. He squeezed his eyes shut. "He's at the old meatpacking plant, the one on 43rd Street. He moved all his top guys there this morning. They barricaded the steel doors. They have automatic weapons. It's a damn fortress, Mr. Yu. They are waiting for you." Joon-seo pulled the knife away and shoved Mickey backward. He stood up slowly. He looked at Leo. "Break his legs so he can't run to a phone and warn them," Joon-seo ordered without blinking. "Leave him in the alley outside." "No, please. I told you what you wanted," Mickey begged, kicking his feet wildly as Leo grabbed him by the back of his dirty collar and dragged him toward the heavy metal door. Joon-seo completely ignored the screams. He turned back to his army of men. He lifted his heavy black rifle. He pulled the charging handle back and let it slam forward. The loud, sharp click echoed off the concrete walls. "Load up," Joon-seo said, his dark eyes fixed on the garage door. "We are going to the meatpacking plant. Kill anything that breathes." The black SUV slammed into the heavy steel doors of the old meatpacking plant. The metal groaned and snapped, folding inward like a crushed soda can. The truck came to a hard stop inside the dark, freezing loading bay. Before the dust even settled, Joon-seo kicked his door open. The freezing rain from the street blew inside, mixing with the smell of old rust and rotten meat. The inside of the plant was a massive, empty cavern of concrete and hanging metal hooks, and it was full of Marcus Thorne's men. The loud crack of a rifle ripped through the air. A bullet smashed into the windshield of the SUV, raining glass down on the seats. "Go!" Joon-seo roared. His men flooded into the building. The dark loading bay lit up with flashing yellow fire. Dozens of guns went off at the exact same time. It was deafening. The noise bounced off the hard concrete walls, shaking the floor. Joon-seo raised his heavy black rifle. He didn't run for cover. He didn't hide behind the trucks like his men. He just started walking forward into the dark. Thorne's men were shooting from the metal catwalks above. Joon-seo looked up. He saw a muzzle flash in the shadows. He aimed and pulled the trigger. The heavy gun kicked against his shoulder. The man on the catwalk screamed, dropping his weapon, and fell over the railing. He hit the concrete floor with a wet, heavy thud and didn't move again. "Left side," Jin yelled over the noise. 3 men jumped out from behind a pile of wooden pallets. They fired wild shots. One bullet buzzed past Joon-seo's ear, close enough that he felt the hot wind. Joon-seo didn't blink. He turned his rifle and fired a short, controlled burst. 2 of the men dropped instantly, their chests torn open. The 3rd man turned to run. Leo, the big bald man, stepped out from the smoke and shot him in the back with a shotgun. The man flew forward, sliding across the dirty floor. It was a slaughter. Thorne's men were street thugs. They sold drugs and collected gambling debts. They were not an army. Joon-seo's men were killers. They moved together, clearing the massive room piece by piece. They stepped over dead bodies without looking down. Empty brass shells bounced on the concrete, making a constant, tinkling sound like twisted wind chimes. Joon-seo reached the metal stairs at the back of the plant. He dropped his empty magazine. It hit the floor, and he shoved a fresh one into the rifle. His white shirt under his jacket was soaked with sweat and old blood. His breathing was heavy, but his hands were perfectly steady. "He's up there," Jin said, pointing his gun up the stairs toward a small office with dirty glass windows. "Manager's office. He has 2 guys left guarding the door." Joon-seo started walking up the metal steps. His heavy boots clanged loudly. He wanted Thorne to hear him coming. He wanted the fat bastard to know his time was up. The 2 guards at the top of the stairs leaned around the corner and fired. Sparks flew off the metal railing near Joon-seo's hand. He ducked, raising his rifle, and fired right through the thin drywall next to the door. The high-powered bullets tore through the cheap wood and plaster like paper. He heard a scream on the other side. Blood sprayed across the dirty glass window of the office. Joon-seo reached the top landing. 1 guard was dead on the floor. The other was holding his stomach, crying and coughing up blood. Joon-seo stepped over him without a second glance. He lifted his heavy boot and kicked the office door right near the handle. The wood splintered, and the door flew open, slamming against the inside wall. Marcus Thorne was hiding behind a large, cheap metal desk. He was a heavy man with greasy hair and a dark suit. He was holding a silver shotgun, his hands shaking so hard the barrel rattled against the desk. The office smelled like cheap cigars and piss. "Don't do it, you!" Thorne screamed, his voice cracking with pure terror. "I'll shoot. I swear to God I'll blow your fucking head off." Joon-seo slowly walked into the room. He didn't raise his rifle. He just let it hang by the strap over his shoulder. He pulled his long, sharp hunting knife from his belt. "You burned my warehouse," Joon-seo said. His voice was completely flat. It didn't sound angry. It sounded dead. "You killed Tommy and Rick." "It was business," Thorne yelled, tears sliding down his fat, sweaty face. "You took my shipping lanes. I had to send a message. You know how this works, Joon-seo. We can fix this. I have money. I have $3 million in cash sitting in a safe house on the north side. It's yours. Take it all. Just let me walk away." Joon-seo stopped in the middle of the room. He looked at Thorne. He saw a pathetic, weak man trying to buy his life. Then, he remembered the hospital room. He remembered the loud, rapid beeping of the heart monitor. He remembered the feeling of Jessica's cold hand in his, thinking she was going to slip away into the dark. You sent men to a hospital, Joon-seo whispered. The dark, violent beast inside him clawed at his ribs. You put a hole in my wife's chest. Her heart stopped, Marcus. She died on that floor. Thorne swallowed hard. He raised the shotgun, aiming it right at Joon-seo's chest. She's a nurse, you. She was a nobody before you put a ring on her. You're going to throw away your life for some broke bitch from the South Side. Joon-seo moved faster than a human should. He grabbed the barrel of the shotgun with his left hand and shoved it upward just as Thorne pulled the trigger. The loud blast tore a massive hole in the ceiling, showering them with plaster and dust. Before Thorne could pump the gun again, Joon-seo drove the heavy hunting knife deep into Thorne's thigh. Thorne screamed, a high, piercing sound like a slaughtered pig. He dropped the shotgun and fell to his knees behind the desk, clutching his bleeding leg. Joon-seo stood over him. He pulled his black silver pistol from his holster. He looked down at the crying, bleeding man. He thought about the warehouse. He thought about taking Thorne there and using the blowtorch. He wanted to do it. He wanted to hear this man scream for days. He wanted to peel his skin off. But then he heard Jessica's weak voice in his head. I care about your soul. I don't want to be the reason you turn into a devil. Joon-seo closed his eyes for 1 second. He took a deep breath of the dusty, bloody air. I'm not a devil, Joon-seo whispered. He pointed the silver gun at Thorne's head and pulled the trigger once. Bang! Thorne fell backward. The screaming stopped. The room went completely silent except for the sound of rain hitting the roof. Joon-seo stood there looking at the body. He didn't feel better. The burning rage in his chest didn't magically go away. He just felt tired. He put his gun back in his holster. He pulled his knife out of Thorne's leg and wiped the blood off on the dead man's suit jacket. Jin ran into the room, his rifle ready. He saw Thorne on the floor. He looked at Joon-seo. It's done, Joon-seo said softly. The truce is over. The war is over. Burn this place down and let the cops find the ashes. Yes, boss, Jin said. And the other gangs, the ones who stopped answering our calls. They will answer now, Joon-seo said as he walked past his driver and headed down the stairs. Or they will end up like him. The ride back to the hospital was quiet. The sun was fully up now, but the city still looked gray and miserable. Joon-seo stared out the wet window. His hands were shaking again. The adrenaline was leaving his body, leaving him cold and empty. He had killed today. He had ordered the deaths of dozens of men. He was exactly the monster Jessica begged him not to be. He had saved his empire, but he was terrified he had lost his home. When the black SUV pulled up to Chicago Memorial, the police presence was lighter. Joon-seo's men were still guarding the doors, hiding in plain sight in their dark suits. Joon-seo got out of the car. He didn't care that he was covered in dust and blood. He didn't care about the strange looks the nurses gave him in the lobby. He just walked straight to the elevator and hit the button for the top floor. He stepped out into the quiet hallway. His guards nodded at him as he passed. He stopped outside room 801. He rested his dirty hand on the heavy wooden door. He was scared. Joon-seo, the most feared mafia boss in the city, a man who just walked through a storm of bullets without blinking, was terrified to open a door. He pushed it open slowly. The room was bright. The storm had finally broken and pale sunlight washed over the white bed sheets. Jessica was awake. The heavy breathing tube was gone, but she still had an oxygen mask resting under her nose. She was sitting up slightly, propped against a pile of pillows. She looked incredibly weak. Her skin was still gray, and dark circles stained the skin under her eyes. She turned her head when she heard the door click. She saw him standing there. She saw the heavy black jacket. She saw the fresh blood smeared on his cheek. She saw the cold, dead look in his dark eyes. Joon-seo stayed by the door. He didn't walk closer to the bed. He felt too dirty to be near her. I killed him, Joon-seo said. His voice was a harsh, broken whisper in the quiet room. He didn't want to lie to her. He would never lie to her. Thorne burned my warehouse. He killed 2 of my men. I took an army to his door and I killed everyone inside. I killed him. Jessica just stared at him. The slow, steady beep of her heart monitor filled the silence. You told me not to, he continued, dropping his gaze to the clean floor. He couldn't look into her warm brown eyes. You asked me to let it go, but I couldn't. I couldn't let them think I was weak. I couldn't let them think they could touch you and live, so I did it. I fed the monster. He waited for her to yell. He waited for her to tell him to pack his things and leave. He waited for his heart to completely shatter. "Come here," Jessica said softly. Joon-seo snapped his head up. Her voice was weak, rough from the tube, but it wasn't angry. "Jess," he started. "I said come here," she repeated. She slowly lifted her right hand, reaching out toward him. He walked across the room. His heavy boots felt like they were made of lead. He stopped next to the bed. He still didn't reach out to touch her. Jessica looked at the blood on his face. She looked at the exhaustion pulling down his shoulders. She knew what he did. She hated his world. She hated the violence. But she also knew why he did it. He did it for his men. He did it for his pride. And mostly, he did it because he loved her so much it drove him completely crazy. "Did you torture him?" she asked quietly. Joon-seo shook his head. "No, I put a bullet in his head, quick and fast, just like I promised." A single tear slipped down Jessica's cheek. She reached out and grabbed his large, dirty hand. She pulled him closer. "I told you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I told you I care about your soul. You didn't torture him. You didn't become the devil. You just did what you had to do to survive." Joon-seo's breath hitched. His chest tightened so painfully he thought his own ribs were going to break. He fell to his knees right there beside the hospital bed. The great, terrifying mafia king dropped to the floor and pressed his forehead against her small, warm hand. And for the first time since he was a child, Joon-seo started to cry. He sobbed quietly into her blankets, his broad shoulders shaking. The weight of the night, the fear of losing her, the blood on his hands, it all crashed down on him at once. Jessica shifted carefully, ignoring the sharp pain in her chest. She reached down and buried her fingers in his dark, messy hair. She held onto him tight. "I'm sorry," he cried, his voice muffled by the sheets. "I'm so fucking sorry, Jess. I almost lost you." "You didn't lose me," she said softly, staring out the window at the pale morning sun. "I'm right here. We're going to be okay." But Joon-seo. He looked up at her, his eyes red and wet. "Anything, whatever you want." "I am never working a night shift again," she said with a tiny, exhausted smile. Joon-seo let out a wet, broken laugh. He kissed her hand again and again. "Never. I'll buy the damn hospital if I have to. You're never leaving my sight again."